Wow, I thought going after Elmo was bad. So I'm Matt State. I'm the chairman of the Department of Psychiatry at UCSF, and I'm going to speak very briefly, 2 minutes, just to introduce Sofia Vinogradov, who's going to tell you about one of the projects from UCSF, and you've already heard that Dr. Kim Norman is here as well from our Young Adult and Family Center to tell, or you will be able to talk with him after about another project. So I've been chair of psychiatry at UCSF for about 3 years. I came from Yale. And tell you a little bit about the department. So we're responsible for mental health at UCSF Health, which includes Langley Porter Psychiatric Institute. We're also responsible for mental health services at San Francisco VA, Benioff Children's Hospital, San Francisco, Benioff Children's Hospital, Oakland, San Francisco General, and then a number of community organizations that work in affiliation with San Francisco General. And I have to say that I came from Yale and feel so honored and privileged to be able to lead the department at UCSF because both the department and the institution are truly special. I think even compared to our peer institutions, Stanford, Harvard, Columbia, et cetera, what sets UCSF apart, I think across disciplines, is really a deep commitment not only to world-class science and outstanding patient care, but really to social justice. And so I found that in spades since arriving at UCSF, and I don't think that there could possibly be a better time to be in my position. The field is moving at light speed. Advances in neuroscience, information technology, genomics are transforming our ability to look at the brain at unprecedented scale and to reveal the reasons that individuals have, particularly serious mental illness. But as you've heard already, it's also a time of tremendous need. So worldwide, 6 of the top 10 causes of overall morbidity and disability are psychiatric. In the United States, sorry, I'm going to go 2.5 minutes, sorry. In the U.S., I think the most stark statistic is that the single largest provider of mental health care in the U.S. is the criminal justice system. The largest single clinic in the United States providing mental health care is Cook County Jail. So think about that. Could I stand up here as a cardiologist or in any other area in medicine and give you that kind of information? And finally, in our city, all you have to do is walk outside to see the challenges that we face. San Francisco General's court of last resort for individuals who can't pay for other services. 40% of the time in the last 2 months we've been on divert in our psychiatric emergency room because we can't handle the volume in the city. So enormous opportunity, enormous need. And it's the perfect lead into Dr. Vinogradov, who's going to tell you about melding world-class science with a focus on how to reach people with proven treatments, some of which she developed in order to have the largest possible impact we can on serious mental illness. Go.
Thanks, Matt. Good evening. I'd like to welcome you to the world of John Rutledge. John is a man who lives on the streets in the Mission District. He believes that these pigeons are tiny wizards sent by another planet to tell him he is the new Buddha. He's plagued by voices in his head. By day, he goes through garbage cans looking for food. At night, he sleeps on the streets. And when you see John, and you might even be frightened if you hear him shouting at the voices in head, you might cross the other side of the street. You will forget, perhaps, that he was once a young man who, in his case, was an award-winning journalist. He actually had done a documentary on the Special Olympics. And you might even forget also that before that, he was the beloved child of a happy family. What we now know in 2016 is that mental illness is a trajectory, that we have symptoms that appear and progress over time. And we can have a young child who shows absolutely no symptoms whatsoever, and then a young adolescent or young adult who's beginning perhaps to show some very early, mild, nonspecific signs. In John's case, while he was working on the documentary, he thought that perhaps there were other powers that might be interested in stealing some of his ideas. He became ill, and when someone becomes ill and then perhaps refuses treatment or is treatment unresponsive, as was the case for John, we then see a progression into chronicity. What we also know in 2016 is that these illnesses are brain network disorders. They're disorders in how the brain processes information through its wiring diagram, through its networks. We also know that this brain network dysfunction actually is beginning to appear prior to the diagnosis, prior to the full-blown onset of symptoms, and then progresses and gets worse over time. So the interesting question now in 2016 is, understanding this aspect of brain network dysfunction, what new developments can we put into place to treat these disorders? And I'd like to remind you that in essence, the treatment of mental illness has not changed in significant ways for about the last 50 years. We have medications that help reduce symptoms, which is very important. And we have psychosocial therapies, talk therapies that help engender more adaptive coping mechanisms, but we're not targeting the brain neural networks unless we start to look to the neuroscience of London taxi drivers. And when you become a London taxi driver, you make this incredible contribution to neuroscience, which is that you learn to study and understand by heart the map of London. And in a seminal study done about 15 years ago, men who became London taxi drivers were shown to have a change in the structure of the part of their brain that's important in navigation, the hippocampus, and that is what we term brain plasticity. The fact that the brain is continuously remodeling itself in terms of in its response to important things that it has to learn and adapt to in the environment. And so the question we asked ourselves as psychiatrists and psychiatric scientists is, given that we know that there's brain network dysfunctions in mental illness, problems in this wiring diagram of the brain, and we know that this is contributing to some of the symptoms of serious mental illness, such as hallucinations, social dysfunction, say of the mental illness of schizophrenia, which is the mental illness that John Rutledge suffers from. And this is, of course, what is resulting in the chronic disability. Can we develop methods of training and strengthening brain network function into a more adaptive direction using these principles of brain plasticity to create healthier neural network functioning? And the questions we asked is, what would we see then when we did that? And so we're going to pretend that you're one of the subjects in our studies. And before we embark on this brain network training, we're going to have you do a reality monitoring test. So you see this sentence, the dog chased the, you might say, cat. We'll record that. And then I'm going to show you a sentence, the sailor sailed the sea, and I'm just going to ask you to read that. And this is, what you're doing is you're either making up something or you're seeing it, and your brain is making this distinction. And what we see before any training happens is that in people who do not have schizophrenia, for example, we show them dog, cat, and they can easily remember that cat was a word they made up. And we see activation in the front part of the brain. This is the brain that you're looking at sideways. That's the front part of the brain. This is a part of the brain very important in kind of processing information that's relevant to the self. And in people with schizophrenia, they make more errors. It's hard for them to remember what they made up inside their own minds. And on top of that, they're activating a very different part of the brain, a brain region which is in the back part of the brain. And so now we do some training. We do about 50 hours of training. And I'm going to show you one version of a training exercise. I'm not going to tell you what we're training here. You're going to figure it out. People are shown stimuli, and they have to make a correct response. And so I hope you've sorted it out. This is a face processing exercise in which people are looking at facial information and then being able to recognize it from different angles. And people with schizophrenia have difficulty with this kind of a task. It contributes to their inability to respond appropriately to social information. And we can train people to do this more efficiently and accurately and faster. So we do 50 hours of training and a range of different kinds of exercises. And then we have people come back into the scanner and we show them that word pair, dog, cat again. And this time they're making many fewer mistakes. And it's interesting because that's not what we're training, right? We're just training the brain to become much more accurate and efficient in processing its information. And overall, it's processing now better the difference between information that is happening inside the head versus information which is being presented in the external environment. Not only are they sort of improving in terms of just their performance on these specific tasks, but when we look at the brain, we see now more normal brain network interactions. And before training, where there was activation in the posterior part of the brain during this reality monitoring kind of a task, after training, we see normal patterns of activation in this front part of the brain. What we also see is that 6 months later, when we follow up with our participants, they're showing healthier levels of social functioning. So you may ask, this is what we've learned, what next? And this is why I'm here with you tonight. And this is also my chance to actually give a shout out to some of our earliest supporters of our research who are actually sitting here right in the front. I'd like to recognize particularly Brendan Staglin here, who's Communications Director of IMRO, another organization that is got some interest in developing further some brain plasticity treatments, as well as Garen and Sherry Staglin, Brandon's parents, who are here. Brandon worked with us in our research from its early days and gave us very important feedback on how to elaborate the training. And the whole family together, Sherry, Garen, and Brandon, have been supporters and helped seed this work. So this is work we've done in the laboratory. We now are about to embark on a project where we're going to offer training, these exercises, these brain exercises, remotely to young individuals anywhere in the country. And we've received some initial funding from a foundation, but we would like to be able to expand this to recruit broadly and to increase the number of subjects that we can enroll in this particular research study. And that's where we're seeking some additional support from the Battery. And the idea is that to be able to offer this in a scalable, cost-effective, efficient manner with scientific validity, so that the kind of recovery and success story that Brandon really embodies can be available to young people everywhere. Thank you. Time for a couple questions? Yes?
Have you tried to work with the man that you profiled in the beginning of the video? Did you work with the man that you profiled in the video in the beginning?
We haven't in this particular research I've been describing to you, but there have been clinicians from the VA that have, he's actually a veteran, who have, which is where I work, who have attempted to go out and engage him in treatment, and he refuses. And he actually, family members have attempted to reconnect with him, and he refuses to be engaged. His illness has had a long period of chronicity. And it was implicit in what I said in my last remarks, but really we believe that a key area for intervention is going to be with young people very early. If you'll remember that trajectory I was showing, to really work with people before the brain network dysfunction has gone on for years and years. Yeah. Thank you for that question. Yes?
How do you identify young people that need the program? You said you're going to connect people.
Yeah, well, we've actually started piloting this to see if it's feasible, and we just place ads on Craigslist and Reddit, and we have some connections with some other advocacy organizations. And just to give you an example, we have a young Native American woman who just recently joined our pilot work. She's 17 years old. She has early phases of schizophrenia. She lives on a reservation in Arizona. The nearest mental health clinic is 100 miles away, but she has internet access and a supportive family. And she's been just delighted to sort of connect with a research program that can actually offer her a treatment. Yeah. So, thank you.